Well, I think it's quite clear that people do like a bit of popcorn. The number of people that made it to the end, I was quite surprised and shocked, but thanks for that. I think it's quite important to do a little bit more of a deep dive then. It seems that people have a little bit of an appetite for that. And in this video, I'm going to talk about some comments and feedback that I've had so far. I'm going to share a bit more of the context and what I was thinking about when I decided to withdraw from the selection process of the Conservative Lincolnshire County Council selection. And I think it's all well and good commenting on what all the problems are, but if you aren't providing some solutions, then that's not particularly helpful. So I'm going to talk about and suggest some possible reforms in relation to career politicians that I commented on in the first video. And then finally, I think I'm going to explain my point of view with respect of rental reform and how landlords are getting absolutely annihilated left, right and centre from historic Conservative policy. So, like always, like before, feel free to watch this at a much speedier rate, and yeah, I'll get cracking. So, quite a lot of comments, a huge number of private messages in the background in support, and I really do appreciate spending the effort just to reach out. I had some old colleagues and acquaintances from school that I used to work with, some old college friends that I'd not spoken to for literally decades. Yeah, so it was quite warming to see all of that. There was, there's always going to be people that try and throw a bit of mud, and that's absolutely fine. We have freedom of speech and freedom of thought at the end of the day. So yeah, I'm going to comment on a few of those things. There was one person that did a friend request within about half an hour or so of it landing, and really, really positive about how I've acted. I don't know this gentleman at all, to be perfectly honest, but he was sharing a variety of comments about my demeanour and things like that. So yeah, that was very nice. And then yeah, he sent me a invite to this private group of politically active individuals. So I thought, okay, yeah, I'll have a quick look in here, see what's going on. And then there was there was one comment in there that said, "Oh, he's blaming white people for not having enough children." I'm like, what? What are you on about? I didn't say that. I can't remember making any reference to any protected characteristic in the in my initial video. What makes you think that? So I was like, oh no, I'm out. I'm out this one as well. See you later. Yeah, one thing that I would never want to do is stay in a room with 91 politically charged individuals all arguing with themselves. But it's a closed group at the end of the day. They can argue to the other 90 odd people in there, and it's like, no, I'm out. See you later. Thank you very much, but I've got more important things to think about than arguing with a load of people that like to argue with themselves. So yeah, and again, I really do appreciate the comments that people have shared about how what I've been saying it's resonating with them, and that's why I thought it'd be quite helpful just to go into a little bit more detail to help explain my thoughts. So the next thing then, sharing the context as to why I dropped out of the selection process and what was going through my mind. Now, people that know me, friends and family, know that it's especially hard for me to talk about what I'm thinking about at the best of times. So, you have to bear with me. But there's one person I didn't speak about, and that was Steve O'Dare. And I didn't really want to speak about him directly because he told us, a few days before that he didn't want us to announce that he was standing for Lincolnshire County Council until he'd got all his literature done. So I thought, okay, I'll let him do that. It seems that it was public knowledge anyway, which is fine. But yeah, I need to set the scene. Now, Steve O'Dare rejoined the Conservative Party, 4 years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, something like that. I'd noticed that he was speaking a lot of, he was asking lots of challenging questions, the right questions to leaders on social media, and I liked his approach in doing that. I thought at times, it was quite direct, but sometimes that's needed. And I thought, you know what, I quite like this guy. Let's give it a go. Let's attempt to build a relationship. Now, obviously, there was a lot of things in Skegness Town Council that the Conservative group didn't believe in and had big issues with respect of certain individuals' conduct during the King's coronation, and individuals whom and their approach at dealing with things like the grass-cutting shenanigans and dilemma last summer. So yeah, we did a couple of those podcasts together. It was good fun. We'd built a positive relationship, and we were working quite well. Are working quite well with each other. Now, set the context even more. When, as some of you probably know, I was responsible for organising volunteers and dealing with the road closures for the Remembrance parade, and a day before the Remembrance parade, obviously I'd shared the fact that I'd had 14 volunteers cancel, and it was pretty dire. But I'd also just received some quite distressing news that my dad had been taken into, he's in intensive care abroad in a really bad way, a day before the event. Steve O'Dare was the first person that I phoned asking for some advice. So obviously I'd put my trust, I trust this person a lot, and I really valued his opinions and judgment. So I phoned him up wanting some advice and what to do, and he shared some wisdom, which is I really like. And obviously he couldn't do it because he's a veteran and he has to, it's his duty to be parading. Absolutely, fully understand that. I phoned Carl second. I knew I wasn't ever going to ask either of them, because Carl does the majority of his trade on a Sunday. So, he would be, you can't just get cover for staff. I know what that's like. I know he couldn't do that aspect. So I made the decision to not fly out and to crack on and deal with it. And I got a flight later on that day once it had all finished. So, my rapport and connection with Steve as a colleague, I thought was really high and really strong. So, when I got a phone call from James Campwell, the chairman of the Boston Conservative Association, to say, look, you've already been pre-selected, we don't need to do that bit, you've already approved that bit, all you need to do is turn up and make your point to the committee. It's like, okay, fine. I asked, who else is standing? And you get the corporate response, I can't really go into that, I can't share that. Fine, okay, whatever. I had an assumption that Carl Drury probably would, and rightly so. It's his right, of course. And so I arrived and joined the Zoom meeting with half the people with their cameras switched off, and half of them, and I saw Steve O'Dare's name there. I was like, okay. It's a bit awkward. Because one thing for sure in politics is it's dividing, it's polarising, and if ever you stand against somebody, they're not an enemy, but they're the opposite team. And I thought, at this time, would Steve do a good job? Yeah, he probably would. We would have representation in Skegness, for sure. I don't know Carl Drury in any way, but I do know Steve. I thought, I built a relationship to know Steve. He would fight for Skegness. So I thought, well, if I stay in, it's going to make Steve, if I win over Steve, then it would put me, everybody, it would be a bit odd and a bit awkward potentially. And so I made the immediate and rash decision to say, I'm out. That's okay, thank you very much for the invite. Now I know who's standing. I've decided to withdraw from that. job done. Obviously then, I immediately phoned Steve up afterwards and said, Steve, why didn't you just tell me you were standing? And he said how it was such a short turnaround and he's been away and he didn't have time, and he apologised. And I thought, okay, fine, job done, finished. I knew he'd do a good job, and the call ended. He cracked on with his meal with his family, and and that, a couple of days after that, thinking about it in at night and things like that, I thought maybe we don't have this union, this camaraderie, this joint working that I thought we did have. I know, as I mentioned in the first video, Carl wasn't loyal to the group. He was loyal to the council, the Lincolnshire County Councillors. Would Steve be the same? I don't know, maybe. Maybe I'm not a great judge of character, perhaps. And that's when I realised, well, let's think about where I align. If we haven't got that joint camaraderie, then cue the start of the first video. So hopefully that gives a little bit more context, because one person commented on, you moan about career politicians, but look what you're doing, you're manoeuvring and you're standing for, and you're moving. I mean, come on. I've been a councillor. This is my third term. If you think a career politician makes decisions on lich gates and grave digging, and then sure, be my guest. But I had an opportunity to stand for district, and when Dad didn't decide to re-stand, I could have attempted to go for that as well. When Sue got appointed instead, but I didn't. So you can't really say as a career politician. Look at the facts. So that's pretty much it. That's been anyway negative, if I'm being honest. Everybody else has been really supportive and saying, what you said makes an absolute lot of sense, and crack on. So then I've done enough moaning about stuff. Let's provide some solutions. What can we do about this? So what I did was, obviously I made lots of scathing comments about the value of certain individuals' contributions, and then I decided to delve a little bit deeper and have a look at the members' allowances that you see here. This tells you in black and white from a Freedom of Information request who got paid what and why. So here it is in a bit of a spreadsheet. So the individuals. Let me just clean this up for you. Let's just hide some of this away. So here we have it. Basic allowances. Special, this is what I was talking about. Special responsibilities. That's like somebody's salary. Travel. Okay, that's quite a lot. I'm not sure what subsistence non-taxable. Maybe that's food. Well, that's absolutely fine. I like to see though that the county council does allow for people to claim for childcare commitments to try and not restrict people with young families. I think that's quite a nice thing. Nobody claiming that though. So for 1 year, 1 year, this is what's been taken out of the public purse. Over the tenature of somebody's term, 4 years, over the tenature of somebody's 4-year term, nearly £500,000. It's not funny. It's really not laughable, is it? But does that seem like good value for money to you? Well, what would we do about it then? I mean, all of these basic allowances that you get, really, no matter what you do, it needs shaking up. It needs massive reform. I don't know, maybe something like, I don't, because one thing that I want to make clear, I don't want people to be financially disadvantaged for taking up public office and volunteering and being in the spotlight. People do need to be reasonably compensated, but it needs to be fair for everybody, and most importantly, the taxpayer. £500,000 quid for 4 years for 4 councillors in our area. Oh man. So yeah, I think it does need to be fair, and there does need to be some compensation. But let's think about it in a fairer kind of way. Let's say before you were a councillor, you worked and you earned, I don't know, £26,000 or whatever in a job, or you're self-employed or whatever. Then sure, they could probably get up to what they would have had for the time off that they've had to have taken. So if their council duties took 100% of their working week, then maybe they should be entitled to up to 100% of they worked at previously. Just to safeguard, from millionaires potentially enrolling, and then all of a sudden there'd be millions worth of pounds of expenses paid to one person. You could put like an upper limit of the average wage in the UK. If you've never worked a day in your life before, because you're a career politician, then maybe up to what the, universal credit allowance would give you. These are sorts of radical, difficult decisions that you can't leave to these councillors to make, because what did they do? They voted to give them all themselves a pay rise instead. This is the stuff that's really distasteful to members of the public. So it needs dealing with, and you could put some sort of proposal together where it's based on a councillor's previous historic incomes, so that if they are self-employed and they are, they're working, then they're not going to be crippled financially. They can still have a lifestyle that they had prior to that. I think that's fair. And you can do that quite simply by looking at the P60s and the P45s and that kind of thing from the previous year. That's what HMRC do. So I think that's perfectly fair and more palatable than 20 grand's worth of special responsibilities. I mean, look, Sue had some special responsibilities over here. Nearly 4 grand for it. I'd love to know what that was. I've got no idea. So yeah, that's how I would reform local, just one of the many things. I'm not going to talk about any other stuff that should be changed, like how the pothole gangs are managed and that kind of thing. That's a different conversation. I don't want it to be too long. Now, bringing back then to a national item, I talked about the rental market, and how landlords are, been absolutely battered by historic Conservative policy. And then a couple of Labour mob chirped up and said, well, these demonising these landlords, of course they should be providing energy certificate Cs for their tenants. It's like, just wake up. Get into the real world. If a landlord is facing tens of thousands of pounds of forced expenditure, it's not the government paying for it, it's these landlords. Some of these landlords, it's like they're on a mortgage or whatever. They're just going to go, no, see you later, too much effort, too much money, I'm out. Now, a landlord, when it was the Labour government, last Labour government, landlords used to, if somebody was on benefits or welfare, I don't like the term benefits actually, because I believe that a benefit is something you get for working, so I'll change that. If they're on receiving welfare for whatever reason, housing welfare, that used to be paid directly to the landlord, so the risk of them not getting into arrears was a lot lower. Conservatives came into power, and no, they gave it them in a cash lump sum. Okay, you're making some assumptions that everybody is great money managers, and they, so already landlords are a bit of a losing battle sometimes. And you've all seen things like, you can't pay, take it away kind of situation. The legal process that you have to go through to get somebody out that's not paying their rent, it costs thousands. They'll probably leave the property in an absolute state and trash it. And these landlords, some of these, a good chunk of these, are probably their family home that maybe there was left to them in a will, or these are the sorts of things that the Conservatives have failed on. And the reality is, landlords are selling up at a fast. It's never been so fast, the amount of landlords that are packing up and getting out of the business, which increases the rent for tenants. You've got lots of people that can't afford to get on the property ladder for credit reasons or whatever. So what do? You're going to cripple them with a massive rent that they have to pay. There's no social housing, and as much social housing as there should be, so they're going to have crippling rent. They can't then save for a mortgage or get on the property ladder. And that's probably impacting my generation and generations younger than me more than people that were in the buy your council house generation, the property boom generation. It's not fair. Landlords are the solution, in my opinion, to the housing crisis. They need to be effectively incentivised. I've never had a conversation with Richard Tice or anything about it. I know he's a successful businessman, but that's actually what you need to be leading our country. People that have done performance management reviews with staff, that have hired, that have had to have difficult conversations, not career politicians that have never worked a day's work in decades. Come on, get up into the real world. So yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it for this video. We've already spent another 20 odd minutes. So again, if you've made it this far, hats off to you. You're obviously a bit more of a glutton for this kind of thing than I think. But again, I do find it hard to talk about this stuff, what I'm thinking. I really do appreciate feedback and support, and everybody take care. Let's be friendly, let's be professional, and let's make a change and get things moving in the right direction. Take care.